I will briefly go over the post-deployment challenges of the National Guard and Reserves. Table of contents include the introduction, the Reserves and National Guard, discharge status from the military, post-deployment challenges, resources, and in conclusion. Since the first Gulf War, we've seen an increasing use of the reserve forces for contingency operation. Traditionally, the reserve forces were used as a strategic reserve for use in major conflicts. We have seen an evolution of the role to more of an operational reserve, more fully integrated with the active duty forces. This has created challenges in training and resources. The 1 weekend a month and 2-week annual training limits the amount of time for training, causing longer pre-deployment training. The reserve forces have also traditionally received hand-me-down equipment from the active forces, creating challenges in equipping the force. Another challenge is having individuals and units attached to other units, which they're not familiar with and the command's not familiar with, which creates another challenge. The major challenge that we will talk about is post-deployment challenges faced by the reserve forces. There has always been an issue between the state and federal governments as to who has the power and control over the National Guard and Reserves. There's been an issue on how the National Guard and Reserves are treated as citizens as well as veterans. There's a continuing struggle for better treatment of National Guard and Reservists and better access to veteran benefits. The post-deployment challenges faced by the National Guard and Reservists are different than active duty service members. Some of the challenges they face relate to employment, health care, including mental health, reintegration into civilian life, and access to accurate service records. The Department of Defense Form 214 or DD 214 is the report of separation. It contains information normally needed to verify military service for benefits, retirement, employment, and membership in veterans organizations. Information shown on a report of separation may include the service member's date and place of entry into active duty, home address at the time of entry, date and place of release from active duty, last duty assignment, and rank, military job specialty, military education, decorations, medals, badges, citations, and campaign awards, total credible service, total prior active service, total prior inactive service, foreign service credited, and separation information, type of separation, character of service, authority, and reasons for separation, and enlistment eligibility codes. But general discharges are given to service members whose performance is satisfactory but is marked by a considerable departure in duty performance and conduct expected of military members, equivalent to an honorable discharge in respect to VA disability and most other benefits. However, a general discharge may affect the ability to participate in the GI Bill, service on veterans commissions, and other programs where an honorable discharge is required. Other than honorable discharge is the most severe form of administrative discharge. The other than honorable discharge are given to service members convicted by a civilian court in which a sentence of confinement has been adjudged or in which the conduct leading to the conviction brings discredit upon the service. Most veterans' benefits are not available to individuals who receive other than honorable condition discharges, including the GI Bill in most cases, VA healthcare benefits. A bad conduct discharge is punitive discharge that can only be given by a court-martial, either special or general, as punishment to an enlisted service member. Almost all benefits are forfeited by bad conduct discharge. A dishonorable discharge, like a bad conduct discharge, is a punitive discharge rather than an administrative discharge. It can only be handed down to an enlisted member by a general court-martial. All veteran benefits are lost. U.S. federal law prohibits ownership of firearms by those who have been dishonorably discharged in most cases. A dishonorable discharge results in the loss of the right to vote and the right to receive governmental assistance of any kind. They cannot obtain a bank loan and they are unable to find work at state or government level. Finding gainful civilian employment is also difficult. It is important to inform veterans that there is a process to appeal their discharge status and upgrade their discharge to allow them to receive VA benefits. Post-deployment challenges. Employment. One of the most notable challenges before and post-employment for the National Guard and Reservist members is their employment status and their civilian capacity. There is a possibility of losing their jobs because of deployment, losing opportunities for deployment, employment, and reduction in earnings due to deployment. The Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Act of 1994, USERRA, is a federal law that establishes rights and responsibilities for uniformed service members and their civilian employees. USERA is a federal law intended to ensure that persons who serve or have served in armed forces, reserve, National Guard, and other uniformed services are not disadvantaged in their civilian careers because of their service, are promptly reemployed in their civilian jobs upon their return from duty, and are not discriminated against in employment based on past, present, or future military service. Many returning reserve component service members have problems in returning home, reconnecting with family members, finding employment, and returning to school. Lingering health problems related to combat include traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. Reservists are based at reserve centers, and National Guard personnel are based at local armories. The reserve centers and armories are unable to organically provide pre-deployment and post-deployment support services. The reserve components rely on active military installations for these services. Most reserve centers and armories are not located close to active duty bases, which creates unique challenges for reserve component forces. Department of Defense has developed a group of programs to assess health needs of all service members who have been deployed overseas by obtaining information on their health concerns. DoD administers the health assessment before deployment, another when service members return from deployment, and third, 90 to 180 days after deployment, which is called the post-deployment health assessment. Mental health problems have a disproportionate effect on the reserve component. The service members may not live within proximity to a military treatment facility and often only have limited access to medical benefits. Among scholarly peer-reviewed literature, rates of mental health problems among National Guard members range from 11% in a sample of 157 post-deployed National Guard members to 13.8% in another sample of 522 post-deployed National Guard members, to as high as 48.5% in a sample of 97 post-deployed National Guard members. There have been many initiatives designed to address the mental health needs of the reserve component forces in recent years. Fiscal year 2019 Department of Defense appropriations legislation provides $8 million for the National Guard Preventive Mental Health Pilot Program, includes $4 million for the Army National Guard and $4 million for the Air National Guard. On March 12, 2019, Senator Jerry Moran, Republican of Kansas, and Senator John Tester, Democrat of Montana, announced the Care and Readiness Enhancement for Reservists Act to address the high rate of suicide among members of National Guard and Reserve. The bill would close a gap in mental health care. The Care for Reservists Act would allow the Defense Department to fund needed behavioral and mental health care, whether the service member is within his or her pre-deployment window or has never deployed at all. The bill would also allow members of the Guard and Reserve to seek care at vet centers for mental health screening and counseling, employment assessments, educational training, and other services. It would be a good start in addressing the mental health challenges of the reserve component forces. There's been an issue with lost or missing records in combat zones. The problem is greater when individuals are assigned or attached to units which they do not belong to. There are many instances of missing commendations and incident reports. There are incidents of confusion between commands about which unit has the record-keeping responsibilities. A ProPublica and Seattle Times investigation in 2012 reported that dozens of Army and National Guard units had lost or failed to keep required field records, in some cases impeding the ability of veterans to obtain disability benefits. The problem primarily affected the Army, but also extended to U.S. Central Command in Iraq. The U.S. Army has conceded a significant loss of records documented battlefield action and other operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and has launched a global search to recover and consolidate field records from the wars. In an order to all commands in a separate letter to leaders of the House Committee of Veterans Affairs, Secretary of the Army John McHugh said that the service is taking immediate steps to clarify responsibility for wartime record keeping. These steps to ensure the commanders put a priority on record keeping are extremely important. Loss of missing records can halt or delay veterans from receiving benefits they are entitled to. Missing or incomplete records also impact promotion and other personnel actions. We owe it to our veterans to make sure that they have everything they need after deployment. According to a recent study, the National Guardsmen and Reservists are more likely to suffer aggression, alcohol misuse, and underemployment post-deployment. The study explained in the scope of the problems, post-deployment and reintegration challenges in the National Guard unit looked at self-reporting surveys gathered from about 126 of 300 Army National Guard members who returned to civilian life after serving 1 year in Iraq. Reserve component personnel are different from the active component because they leave civilian life and deploy and then return to their civilian lives after deployment. One of the greatest challenges is family relationships for the returning reservists. The study identifies there as a honeymoon period in which families delighted that the service member has returned unharmed, However, as this honeymoon period wears off, the service member now has to reintegrate into a family that has redefined roles while they were away. This transition period also is often stressful, disrupts routines, and creates conflict within the family and with interpersonal relationships. DoD should expand its efforts to leverage the support resources offered by non-governmental programs, promote community awareness of the challenges reserves component families face, and honor employers that support Guard and Reserve employees. DoD should facilitate coordination across resource providers. DoD can expand the level of interaction between different types of resource providers and build on existing networks. This could include efforts to target specific populations and refer them to at different points during the deployment cycle, and leveraging informal resources such as social networks and support efforts to refine national level resource directories by including more non-governmental organizations to the direct and make the directories more user-friendly. No one who has served this great nation should be forgotten. The citizen soldier is one of the main aspects of the United States that sets us apart from other nations. We have to continually strive to provide all the care that they need to fully function in society once they have returned from service. Here's a list, not a totally inclusive list of resources for National Guard members and reservists. There are sources that you can refer to for further information on this topic.